Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I am talking today about how professional athletes prioritize their health and their performance. So, here's a scenario that maybe you have gone through or noticed. There are like many athletes who come to work with me have been and me included, right, have been told that your success relies on training hard, showing up, getting the time in, consistency, technique, equipment, strategy, like all of those things are prioritized oftentimes by teams, but also that's typically what coaches ask us to do, right? They want us to show up, they want us to be consistent. All of those things are really important in sport for sure. Also, your mindset, your mental game, mental performance, all of those things also are critical. However, where I see a lot of athletes struggle is over time when their body can't keep up with the training that they're doing. And part of that could be, as we look into it a little bit more, part of it could be their, it is their lifestyle, maybe also their nutrition, also could be other habits. Maybe it's sleep, maybe it's recovery, maybe it's traveling a lot, maybe there's a lot of stress from traveling or from building a new home or moving, which is a very stressful event in life. All of those things that are going on may not be giving them the support or what they need in order to keep up with their training. So just over time, that training load starts to kind of chip away a little bit. And so what this episode and also what this show is all about is creating a foundation of health for athletic performance, right? So I know that there's a ton of podcasts out there on health, on sports nutrition, on fueling, and all of those things. And there's obviously a necessity for all of those things. Yet, a very common scenario is athletes can be tracking their macros or working with a really awesome nutritionist or dietitian, taking all of the supplements or taking none at all, doing all of the training and working with the best coaches and still have symptoms and warning signs that something isn't quite right inside. So here's two stories for you. Number one is my story of working with a vitamin D deficiency. So I was training for my first half Ironman, an Ironman 70.3. And one of the things that happened to me is I was doing my typical training and I had a strength workout. It had like 20 or 30 heavy squats in it with some running and things like that. And this was something that was fairly standard for me. It wasn't like out of the normal or anything like that. And one of the things that happened is I did that workout and then I was like really sore the next day. And then really sore the next day. And then also really sore the next day. And this was kind of out of the normal because recovery for me, like, especially if I have a hard workout, might take a day or two, but it definitely doesn't last a week, right? So I go in and I see my massage therapist, I get chiropractic care, and I do all of these things to try to get my body to recover. Meanwhile, I'm definitely eating enough food and all of these things, but just something just still isn't quite right. And 2 weeks later, I was still dealing with this incredible pain and muscle soreness. It felt like my muscles, my quad muscles, were like literal ropes. And that was just really, really weird. And I couldn't quite figure out what was happening. So what I did is I ordered a panel that showed me all of my nutrient levels. And I came back super deficient in vitamin D. And when I mean super deficient, I mean that like the normal levels would be between like 50 to 80, and mine were in the teens. That is not just a low level of vitamin D, that is an absolute deficiency. And then what I started wondering is like why that would be the case. So I started digging a little bit deeper and I found that vitamin D is one of the nutrients that's absolutely essential for optimal recovery. So I fixed my vitamin D levels. I fixed some of the other things that I found on there. And then I was able, and this was just, several months before my Ironman was supposed to come up and I wasn't really being able to train very well. It was really, really, really stressful. But it ended up being fine because I fixed my vitamin D levels. I did super high vitamin D for a little bit and then was able to drop that down, got back into training. And my first half Iron, like I was able to do it. I mean, there were many things that that I've learned about doing Ironmans and things, but I was still able to do it and I was still able to compete. And I didn't allow I didn't spend too much time kind of tinkering around, wondering what was going on and thinking that, oh, it's going to go away. I listened to my labs, I listened to what was going on, and I fixed the problem. So most athletes focus on training. Maybe they work with a dietitian or have in the past, or a nutritionist, because a lot of teams and a lot of athletes have access to nutritionists and dietitians, and they're usually really good. Um, and they could be better maybe with recovery, and I say that could be better with quotation marks around it. And maybe you've worked on your nutrition and fueling, and you've got all of those things dialed in, maybe even done a bit of mindset work or mental performance or meditation based on what your team or your coach or whatever you have access to. Maybe you even work with somebody on that. But the issue though is that that doesn't necessarily look at what's going on internally. So what I did was I created my 6 pillars for the foundation. This is my framework. These are my pillars for how I look at an athlete when they come in. So let's talk about those 6 pillars. So number 1, environment and genetics is where I start with the first pillar, because this can include toxin exposure, which could be that your sport is in an environment that maybe is a little bit toxic. So for example, let's choose your skydivers. So skydivers are a very interesting athlete to work with because they are around a lot of airplane jet fuels, and those can be highly toxic. So making sure that you have all of those pathways open so that you can remove those toxins is really, really important. And toxin overload is definitely an issue. Another example of where toxin exposure could be coming up is, let's say, and we're going to talk about this actually in a different pillar, but let's say your gut health isn't quite functioning properly. You're not necessarily going to be able to absorb some nutrients if you can't also get toxins out. So now you're starting to see how a lot of this stuff is working together. Also, cleaning supplies in your house, the type of products that you put on your skin. There's a lot of different areas where toxin exposure can come up. Also, like water source, all of those things as far as what we drink. Also, things like your relationships. We can have that part of our environment is also really important. Having really positive people and positive relationships, good friendships, good family members around, good team work. And also, if you do have a job outside of your training, having a really good work environment is something too that can put a lot of stress on an athlete and cause a lot of issues there as well as travel, work, finances. Even all of those different areas can affect, not only they're part of your environment, but they can affect how your genetics are expressed. The second pillar is daily habits. So this includes things like sleep and nutrition. This includes things like recovery, as well as stress management. Those daily habits and routines are really critical. And especially if you look at a lot of pro athletes, they've dialed in their daily habits. They know, what they're going to do at certain times of the day. They know when they're eating, they know when they're fueling. And there's a lot of things that they have really dialed in well. They also know that they're going to bed at a certain time. They're waking up at a certain time, and they're maybe even working with somebody to help with stress management, stuff like that. They understand that part of being a high performing athlete is also keeping your stress under control, right? So that's because, keep this in mind, being an athlete is it's a highly inflammatory endeavor. So being able to manage stress is a really critical piece of being able to perform at a high level. Pillar number 3 is inflammation. Just as I mentioned, being an athlete is an inflammatory endeavor. So this doesn't mean that you need to go and take all the anti-inflammatories and all of like the fish oils and all of the things. But what it means is that you need to understand how your body uses inflammation and how it correlates to your recovery, how you perform, how you adapt to that training. And it also can be what causes problems as well. If inflammation just kind of overloads the system and then starts to affect your training and your performance. So understanding how inflammation works is really critical. And that is going to be what episode 2 is about. So stay tuned for that. Pillar number 4 is it's called internal system function. I probably could come up with a better name for that. That might sound a little bit overwhelming or kind of like, I'm going to go to sleep. However, stay with me. So internal system function is essentially about checking all of the systems that are going on inside. And what you may have heard before, and you may also be on this level with me as well, is that every single system is connected, right? Like, um, we need to make sure that our energy pathways are on point. So this is like your mitochondria, making sure that you have enough, and all of these connect, right? So making sure you have enough nutrients and making sure that you are managing some of that oxidative stress. All of those things can affect the mitochondria. And keep in mind that, and we'll also talk about this in a later episode as well, is that the mitochondria are part of what makes an athlete perform really well. There are studies that have shown, after looking at like biopsies of different types of muscle tissues, the athletes that are performing at a high level have not only more mitochondria per, muscle tissue, but they also have really good, well functioning mitochondria too. So they're not toxic, things like that. Another system would be like your immune system, your GI tract, your detox pathways. And this isn't talking about that you need to go do all the supplements and all the things. This is just making sure that the way that your body removes toxins and used up medications and hormones and things like that are all open. Another one are like hormones and your brain chemistry, as well as the musculoskeletal system itself, nutrient status, reproductive systems, and physiology. So there's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to do that on this show as we go. So stay tuned for all of that. But as you can start to see, it's not just about training. And it's not just about strategies and technique and different types of equipment, right? All of these things are part of creating a foundation for a healthy athlete that can then also perform. So here's the thing. If pillar 3 and 4, so if inflammation and if these kind of internal systems are all functioning well and they're all dialed in, then you can absorb the training and you can adapt to that training. Please keep in mind, and we're going to talk about this too in a follow-up episode, but when it comes to adapting to exercise or training in general. So let's say you're spending anywhere between an hour to 4 hours on a training block per day. That time that you spend there isn't when you adapt to training. You adapt to training afterwards. So later on in the day. So this means that not only does the work that you put in for your training that's really important, but you also, and this is another area where athletes kind of don't understand what's happening with their physiology as it comes to training and being able to adapt and get stronger and faster and whatever else it is that you're trying to do. But a lot of people focus a lot on their training and they put all of their energy into that, but then the rest of their day, their habits, the things they do, the things they eat, the rest of their entire day is they don't focus at all on that time. And the issue with that is that where you adapt to training isn't in the training itself, it's afterwards. It's outside of your training, because what happens is you put that stress into the body and then the body goes, "Ooh, I don't really want to be unprepared for that tomorrow." So you do the training, you put the stress into your system, and then it's afterwards that your body starts to adapt. But here's the thing. If inflammation is out of control, and if you also, or it's starting to raise up and it's not being managed well, or it's just starting to, instead of your body being able to mop it up properly, let's say that inflammation is now, and oxidative stress is starting to overload the system, that's when we're going to start to see symptoms. That's when we're going to start to see problems. So, and that's also too where we start to see performance decline. And the thing is like you can have it, like it can literally have nothing to do with fueling or your hydration or your mindset. All could be solid and your technique could all be on point. But as soon as one of those areas gets overloaded or doesn't have what it needs, the whole system starts to throw warning signs, which you would call symptoms. So being able to dial in your inflammation and make sure that all of these internal systems are functioning really well is part of making sure that not only you have a foundation for a really healthy body, but also you're going to see those benefits in your performance. So that's why identifying and making sure that all of these pillars are on point is critical for your success. And I know that's kind of like a success. What does success mean? Whatever it means to you is what it means. Being able to be faster, get a faster time, maybe do an Ironman sub 13 hours, or maybe that's, renewing that contract like my, one of my athletes, or maybe that's making podium, or maybe that's the difference between third, second, or first, right? Or heck, maybe that's just the difference of, not bonking on the run or on a bike, right? Of a triathlon. So though that's what I mean by like all of these different areas are really, really important. Pillar number 5, sports nutrition. So this is also a pillar, making sure that your fueling and hydration are on point, but also that your daily nutrition is on point as well, making sure you're eating enough food, and even also keeping it simple, but making sure you're eating enough food for what you need and what for what your specific needs are is really important. Pillar number 6 is then the training piece. So that's mindset, resilience, technique, and anything else that strategy, anything else that falls underneath that training pillar is part of it. So as you can see, there's 6 pillars where we could be focusing a lot of attention on when a lot of athletes are missing several of those. Are you with me? So think about it like this. I want you to either grab a piece of paper, or if you're driving, just make some mental notes. I want you to just like listen and be like, yes, check, that's me. Yes, check, that's me. And just keep a mental note as you go through some of these. But if you're writing these down, I want you to write down which ones are areas where you said yes. Okay. So here's number 1. Do you struggle to recover? Does it take you 3 to 4 days to get rid of soreness after a workout? And is that soreness pretty darn intense? And it doesn't necessarily matter what type of workout you're doing, whether it's a really, really, really intense CrossFit workout or strength session or a really long bike ride. Like, are you staying sore for multiple days afterwards? Are you extra tired in the morning? Can you sleep 8 to 9 hours and still don't feel rested and energized? Do you have hormone imbalances? Do you get hangry or crash if you don't have food every few hours? Do you get bloated in your gut or have any heartburn frequently, or maybe any aches or pains in your gut, like cramping, abdominal pain? Or do you have an autoimmune condition that affects your gut? Are you noticing more and more fatigue? So maybe that's daily fatigue, or maybe your workouts just aren't feeling as good as they used to. Do you struggle to sleep well? Do you have aches or pains in multiple joints or muscles that either keep recurring and coming back, or you just can't find a solution to them? Do you have shortness of breath that is unusual? Do you have any skin conditions like rosacea, eczema, or acne? Okay, each of these areas, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but each of these areas, those questions, if you said yes to one or multiples, is a potential area in the body that's out of balance. So that's going back to those internal system functions. So all of those organ systems that are happening and all of those axes that connect the brain to different muscles, something isn't quite right. But knowing that that is something that you can fix and you can work on is a really, really great place to start. So the point is this: if you are a high performer, or if you are an athlete that's training for something, you might be a weekend warrior, you might be an age grouper or an amateur athlete, or you might be a professional athlete. You've likely worked with sports physicians and medics. You might have worked with nutritionists, all sorts of people, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't done anything about it yet, and you're just kind of ignoring those symptoms, hoping they're going to go away. But if you have worked with a nutritionist or a dietitian, you can work with a chiropractor, you can work with another functional medicine practitioner. There's so many different people that you can work with that are absolutely incredible at what they do. But if you have a toxic gut, or an inflamed gut, or an inflamed GI tract, or something isn't quite right with your immune system around the GI tract, so many different areas, you're not going to be able to remove the toxins that are in the GI tract and then be able to also absorb really good nutrients either. And this can happen either because your microbiome is there's dysbiosis. So there's too high of levels of different types of bacteria, and that's throwing the whole system off. There's many different reasons for this. Could be leaky gut, like I mentioned above, or intestinal permeability. But your microbiome and your GI tract being in balance is critical for maintaining and also being able to absorb nutrients, maintaining those nutrient levels. You're seeing how all of this connects now, because all of those nutrients are basically just building blocks for your body to be able to produce and do what you want it to do. So if you don't have enough CoQ10, or if you don't have enough vitamin C, if you don't have some of these different factors or enough antioxidants in your body coming in through food, not necessarily supplements, it's going to be really hard for your mitochondria to do their job and to be able to remove some of the toxic products that they produce in making their job and happen, essentially. So, or another scenario, you might be deficient in iron or vitamin D that's leading to your shortness of breath, or like my scenario, that fatigue or really difficulty recovering. Inflammation can also cause that too. So my challenge to you is this. I want you to think about the exercise that we just did and each of those areas and decide which one or several you're going to work on this year. And what steps do you need to take to get it figured out? Do you need to order tests or labs and set a baseline? Do you need to start eating more food and more variety of different types of colors and different types of food? So getting a large variety, more variety. Do you need to balance how much processed food or gluten or certain types of products you're consuming with the ratio of whole foods? Do you need to start down the path of figuring out inflammation and learning more about how to manage oxidative stress as an athlete? Is it time to take a deeper look into your gut and or your immune system? All of those things, right? There are so many different areas that you could start working on. Maybe even it's just figuring out what your levels, your nutrient levels are, getting a few tests run. So here's one place for you to start. Number one, you can get started by going to see your primary care physician and asking for a standard lab workup. Let them know, tell them that you're prioritizing your health this year and you just want to establish a baseline. You want to make sure that any labs that they can run, they get run so that you can know you're focusing on your health. You want to make sure you're 100%, where you need to be. And anything that they can do to help show you where you're at would be great. That list might include something like a complete blood count, so a CBC, a metabolic panel. That might include lipids, so that would be a full cholesterol panel. That might include C-reactive protein, maybe vitamin D and vitamin B12. You might even ask them not only to run vitamin B12, but also see if they can run methylmalonic acid. There's actually a difference between the two, and both of those can tell you a little bit more about whether you're actually deficient in vitamin B12 or if there's something else going on. Maybe you might also want to run a thyroid panel. So that doesn't just include TSH, but that also includes free T3 and free T4, as well as some of the thyroid antibodies like TPO, thyroid peroxidase, couple of different things that you can have run there. HbA1c, so that would be checking for blood sugar, diabetes, sort of balance there. So once you have all of that, then if you want to go further, what you can do is you can go to nwfunctionalmedicine.com. It's going to be a link in the show notes to schedule a free consultation with me. And we can talk about getting specialty labs, like maybe a gut microbiome panel, maybe a full nutrient panel, and anything else that will help to fill in some gaps so that what you get to do is you get a program that is specifically for you. So it's not just like, oh, okay, so maybe you have a little bit of inflammation. Let's just start you on 1,600 milligrams of omega-3s, or maybe we'll start you on a mega dose of 4 grams or 4,000 milligrams of omega-3s, or, standard wise, people should just be on a multivitamin. The problem with that is that it's not specific to you. It doesn't take into account what you actually need. So what you can do is you can run these panels and see what your body is telling you that you need, and then make a plan that is specific for you. And this is why this is just so important. And if you're thinking, whoa, that's a little too fast for me, Dr. K, then what you can do is you can go to drkirsten.com/finishstrong. to learn more about how you can prioritize your health to see even better performance improvements. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for being here. Hey, did you know that up to 70% of athletes may be deficient in at least one micronutrient, if not potentially deficient in two or more? Micronutrient deficiencies like vitamin D, iron, calcium, vitamin E, B12, B9 are super common in athletes, and they can lead to things like fatigue. They can lead to injuries and fractures, getting sick a lot and missing practice, to unexplained pain, and a lot more. On the flip side, though, athletes who corrected nutrient deficiencies saw improvements in VO2 max, vertical jump, grip strength, force, improved delayed onset muscle soreness, and a lot more. That's why I created the Strong to the Finish Line free guide for athletes like you to be able to train and compete symptom-free so that you can have the confidence and the power to perform at your best. Get this guide for free at drkirsten.com/finishstrong.